is a Reddit scary stories video, and today we will be reading from the r/NoSleep Reddit. As always, all the posts and the users will be listed in the description along with a link to the original post, and all credit goes to them entirely. I'll just say quickly before we get into the video as well, if you do enjoy this video, please give it a like, comment and subscribe. Let me know your opinions on these stories, and also if there's anything you'd like to see from me, please let me know in the comments. Let's get into it. Okay, so this one is by u/11 Velociraptors, and it is titled, "My neighbor has been beckoning my children from his window at night." I have actually read this one before. It was in one of All Sorts ASMR's videos, and I thought it was really good, so that's why I want to read this one first. I, 33 male, live in Texas with my daughter Alicia, 8 female, and my son Jay, 4 male. Their mum has been out of the picture for the past 2 years, not dead, just a piece of shit, and I've managed pretty well as a single father. The 3 of us lived in a 2-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, and I've got a solid job, and the kids are thankfully healthy. Everything was smooth sailing until one night 2 months ago, during which I was awoken by Jay poking me in the face. He was sobbing violently, though I recognized it as the "I'm afraid" kind of crying, as opposed to the "I'm hurt" kind of crying, which made me a little less worried. Jay's always been a nightmare prone, so I assumed that was what was causing him distress. When I asked him what was wrong though, he said, "The man in the next house is making scary faces at me." I'd had my fair share of Jay stories about monsters terrorizing him from the dark corners of his bedroom, but this was something new. I assumed he meant our neighbor's house, and their lack of fantastical elements in his description made me uneasy. It felt too specific to be one of his usual nightmares. I got out of bed and whirled with Jay in tow to my kids' room. Alicia was awake in the top bunk. From the soft glow of the nightlight, I could see her crossing her arms and scowling down at her little brother. I didn't turn on any light to give myself a better view of the outdoors and peered out of the bedroom window. Their window had curtains on it, but for once they hadn't been drawn all the way, and there was a small opening between them through which Jay must have looked out. One side of the neighbor's house, the one to our left from the street, was visible from Alicia and Jay's room. There were 2 windows on the neighbor's side of the house, but it was too dark to see inside the one closest to the front of the house. Sorry, no. But it was too dark inside to see anything. I recalled from what I'd seen in the daylight that the window to the left was the one closest to the front of the house, was the kitchen. I wasn't sure what the window on the right was, as it always had the curtains drawn. I asked Alicia if she'd seen anything, and she shook her head. He's He's always having nightmares and crying. I don't want to share a room with him anymore. Dad, I never get any sleep. It's not fair. Of course, hearing that made Jay start crying again, so I let him sleep in my room for the night. He has this TMNT indoor camping bed tent that he prefers to his actual bed. Honestly, at that point, I half suspected his nightmare to be a ploy to get me to let him camp. Anyway, I guess I'm a total pushover because he slept in that tent in my room for the next 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I was again woken up, but this time by Alicia, who was standing over me and shaking my arm. That kid hadn't woken me up in the middle of the night for years. When I asked her what was wrong, she said the neighbour was making faces at me. Those words and the fear in my daughter's voice really put me on edge. I closed the curtains when I said goodnight. Did you open them? Only a little, but it's because I heard a weird noise. Alicia couldn't recall exactly. According to her, she had gotten out of bed to see what was going on, and when she lifted the curtain, she saw a light on in the neighbour's window. The curtains in the back room had been drawn back, and our neighbour was standing in his house right up against the window frame. What was he doing? Alicia thought for a moment, then made an expression I never want to see on my child's face, or anyone else's for that matter, ever again. I won't do it justice by describing it, but it looks something like this. First she smiled, with both sets of teeth, so that there was a little open slither between the rows. Then she furrowed her eyebrows. She inclined her head towards me, kind of Kubrick stare-esque, and strained the muscles in her neck. The worst part, though, was what she did with her hands. She held out her left arm, forearm up. Then she clenched her right hand into a fist and moved it back and forth rapidly over her forearm. Poor thing described it as playing the violin, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that my neighbour was pantomiming cutting. Disturbed, I told Alicia to stop and to not make either the expression or the gesture again. I was angry and confused. My neighbour, a man in his 40s, was a bit of a recluse, but he had seemed normal enough in the 3 or 4 times I had spoken to him. I couldn't fathom why you would do something like that to my kids. After asking Alicia a few more questions, I realised that my neighbour might not have done anything technically, or at least legally wrong. It wasn't against the law to make inappropriate gestures in your own home, but it seemed like he was targeting my kids specifically. Legal or not, I planned to have a little chat with him in the morning. My last question to Alicia was if our neighbour had made any other gestures, and she nodded. Then she started making beckoning, gummy emotions with both of her hands. I had Alicia sleep in my room for that night as well. I also checked out the window in my kids' room, but like before, I saw nothing. The house was completely dark. The next morning before work, and after dropping Alicia and Jay off at school, I spent a good 5 minutes knocking on my neighbour's front door. I figured he was home since his car was in the driveway, but he never answered the door. Eventually, I had to leave for work, and as I was walking away, I turned around quickly to see if he was watching me. He was, the coward. I saw him for a split second at the front window before he ducked beneath the sill and out of view. Clearly, the guy had problems. I yelled out to him to stop fucking kids slept in my room, I hung out in theirs. It was a Friday night and I was ready to pull an all-nighter so that I could catch my neighbour in the act. Although I trusted my kids, I wanted to confirm that there was actually something nefarious going on before I escalated things. I made sure the house was locked up and all the curtains drawn, tucking my kids in, and sat on the floor under the window in their room. At around 9, I started marathoning midnight mass on my phone. I didn't want to wear headphones and miss anything strange, so I kept the volume low and mostly read the subtitles. At midnight, I started to hear strange sounds. Like Alicia said, it's a bit hard to describe. Best I can do is that it was this low, repeated clicking sound. You know the chick chick sound you make to beckon a horse? It was something like that. All I knew is that the sound was undoubtedly to beckon. All I knew is that the sound was undoubtedly coming from a person. After a few minutes of this, the sound switched to what I think was supposed to be a whistle, but it came out all wrong, like someone sucking breath in through their teeth. The sound was so crisp that the neighbour's window must have been open, which was an unsettling thought given that there was only around 15 feet of space between our houses. Certain that the neighbour was at his window and that this was my best chance to get to see him, I stood up and pulled the curtain back in one motion. I saw him right away. There was a dim light on in his room, allowing me to see that horrible expression Alicia had made the night prior. It was one thing to see my child's recreation, but it was far more frightening on an adult. His window was indeed open, and his arms were stuck out into the cold night, violently swiping against each other in a grotesque mimicry of self-harm. When he saw me, I realised that he was looking at another grown man, not some poor child. He stopped his erratic motions, his cartoonish grin faded, and another, more genuine emotion settled over his features. Rage. The man grabbed the window and slammed it shut, then closed the curtains with the same forcefulness. I let my own curtain fall. I was a little shell-shocked, I think. Of course, I was perturbed by the sight of the man, by his face and his movement, and the fact that he'd been doing that for who knows how many nights now in an attempt to frighten my kids. However, another detail stuck out even more concerning to me, which was the fact that I genuinely wasn't sure if the man I had just seen was my neighbour. I'd seen him so few times in the years I'd lived in the house, and I was having trouble conjuring up his face. I sat on the floor for a minute, my blood thundering in my ears. I definitely had enough evidence at that point to call the cops, right? As I was about to pull out my phone, I heard a tremendous smack against the glass of the bedroom window. After a brief hesitation, I pulled the curtain back again. There were no lights on in the neighbour's house, and there was also no one outside from what I could see. I pulled the curtains back a little further and saw a handprint on the top corner of the window pane. It's worth noting that our house is on a raised foundation, and that particular window is very tall. So even though his window is on the first floor, the man outside would have needed an insane vertical to get his hand up there. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. As I explained the situation to them, I quickly walked around the house to see if I could catch a glimpse of the man. My last stop was my bedroom. Once inside, I locked the doors, and while still on the phone with the operator, I took my handgun out of the safe in my closet. My heart was beating out of my damn chest, but I knew I had to stay calm. Even more so when I saw that Alicia was awake and looking out of the tent at me. I reassured her in as few words as I could, whispering that we were okay, but we had to stay very quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, but my firearm ready and my ears straining. My kid's tent was in the corner, and to the left of the tent, in the middle of the wall and directly across from where I sat, was a window. After what felt like an eternity, I saw something. It was a cloudless night, and the moonlight was bright enough that I could see a silhouette through the white curtains. The dark shape was nebulous at first, but became more clear as the man outside stepped closer to the window. Somehow he knew which room we were in. The silhouette didn't move for several minutes, and I remember being thankful for that. From the angle at which she sat, Alicia couldn't see her. Then something happened that I couldn't entirely wrap my head around. The man stepped back from the glass and raised his arms, making a Y shape with his body and his limbs. Only his arms were far too long. They seemed to be double the length that they should have been, each arm about the same length as his entire body. I thought at first that he was holding something, maybe two pipes that just appeared to be an extension of his limbs. But I could clearly see two hands at the end of the extremities. I could see 5 fingers on each hand, flopping around slightly as the man brought his arms closer to the window. Thud, thud, thud. I stood over, readied myself to shoot, but just then the sounds of sirens pierced the quiet night. The man outside banged his hands against the window one last time, and then it was as if someone had sliced his arms at the elbows. His forearm seemed to shear right off, and the man took off running before they so much as hit the ground. When the police officers announced themselves, I answered the door and explained the situation to them. 2 officers, a man and a woman, asked me a few questions about my neighbour, which I assume was necessary to establish probable cause for search. Once finished, they told me to stay inside with the doors locked while they investigated the neighbour's house. I watched them through the window of Alicia and Jay's room. They knocked on the neighbour's door, and when no one answered, they tried the front door handle. I watched the unlocked door swing open. The 2 looked at one another and then entered. I'm not sure what they found inside that house. All I know is that when they emerged a few moments later, they both looked very disturbed. When I went outside to ask what they had found, the female officer told me simply, "Your neighbour is dead." The rest of the night was a blur of strangers in uniforms filing in and out of my neighbour's home. Some came to my porch afterwards to ask me questions, and none offered me any answers. They moved with tight-lipped efficiency, their faces guarded, their words clipped. At one point, I wandered to the side of the house and found several people photographing something on the ground outside my bedroom window. Before they could ask me to leave, I made out the gruesome shape of 2 human arms. The kids and I have been staying in my parents' apartment for months, and I think everyone, even Jay, is getting tired of the cramped living situation. We can't stay in the house. Alicia is way too traumatized for that, and I wouldn't be comfortable staying there while the murderer is still at large anyway. I want to sell the damn house, but our story going semi-viral is making that difficult. After all, who would want a house that, thanks to the news, had become permanently associated with the phrases dismemberment and days of torture and victim barely recognized as human? by u/world away Tweety, and it is titled, "There is a customer none of us are allowed to serve." I work at the Lone Star Diner off the road from Carson City to Reno. Diner name has of course been changed for obvious reasons. More of that later. Why do I work at the Lone Star Diner off the road from Carson City to Reno? Well, because, kind stranger, my life plans didn't work out. Generally, if you're caught working at a diner past college, specifically one in the middle of nowhere, it might mean that things aren't going so hot. But still, why this diner? Why Lone Star specifically? I'm aware you probably aren't actually asking these questions, but nonetheless, I believe they deserve a response. Of all the diners in the world, what makes Lone Star so special is the pay. The pay is great. There are maybe 10 other diners within a 30-minute drive from where I live. Most of them average out to a little over minimum wage. Meanwhile, Lone Star is whipping up a mean of $50 an hour. And that hourly rate is due to one single solitary reason, no matter what anyone tells you, because of him. My first day on the job was fine, more or less. I'd worked customer service before, so I felt like I could run with the strange surprises that came to unique diners. I was able to adapt to the inconsistency of the rules pretty quickly. Unwritten rules like some areas in the restaurant need to be spotless at all times. Others, boss lady couldn't give less of a shit about. Serve customers quickly, but not too quickly, asshole. Customers here don't actually like it when you show up too fast. Give them some time to feel the floor under their boots, to miserably stare ahead and mourn what could have been. You know, diner stuff. They're here because they want to be alone. Pardon the contradiction. Of course, vaguely defined, whispered only by ghosts, rules extend to the cooks as well. If you were somehow secretly celebrity chef Margot Pierre, white in the flesh, your mandate was to keep your damn prowess to yourself. Your job is to make the classics as decently as possible. Not too bad, but not too amazing, just poor enough to be really good. That's what the customers are here for. As the weeks unfolded, I rose, or I suppose crouched to the occasion quite well. You want intentional, pinpoint precision mediocrity. You've come to the right person. Most of the patrons just wanted coffee and brunch, brought to them at medium speed with a semi-predictable cadence of waiter or waitress check-ins afterwards. Done, and done. As the weeks unfolded, I wrote, not one for salty. One day I finally decided to ask my boss the question in the middle of a shift. I didn't want to ruin a good thing by doubting it, but fuck me if I wasn't a little curious. Not a full look at the gift horse's mouth, more of a skeptical side eye. Why $50 an hour? She didn't even look up from her desk at the register, methodically counting out bills. Said it on your first day, you gotta be good at following the rules, and when it's an important rule, you better be damn well perfect. High expectations here. I made a face. Right, high expectations. You think I'm joking? No ma'am, I guess I just... Why did I even speak up? I just think you're running a really cool operation conversation here, cooler than you might realize. It's still work, but the whole thing seems fair. Christ, my waffling skills were so abysmal. Add that to the list of intentional mediocrity. Booyah. Christ, my waffling skills was it. She looked up from her duties and shot me a stern look. I don't run this ship. I'm following the rules here means that you take care of yourself. I'm sorry. I am your employer, sure, and I'll pay you well to be here, sure. But you should be aware there is plenty more going on here than just you and this diner. She glanced down at her watch, then sighed. I usually save this speech for the end of the month, but you already got me halfway through it, so the goals notes. If you don't think you have it in you to follow instructions clearly without protest, and without asking too many questions, then you should leave. Quit. No harm, no foul. A week's worth of pay on the house. The conversation sputtered shortly after that. I tried to find an opening to ask more about what she meant, but she was closed off to the topic moving forward. And you know what? That was fine. If she wanted me to put my head down and just do the work, I could do that. And work I did. Things were good. Mundane small talk with customers was fun. My co-workers were friendly, and I was getting paid well. I'd found a place to park the failures of my life, a place to build from. It must have been a Saturday, I think, when I first noticed him. An occupied seat in the far corner of the diner. No idea how long he'd been sitting there and waiting, though he certainly looked patient. I had the stranger inkling that he'd been left hanging for quite some time, though I couldn't actually remember seeing him enter. Brown corduroy shirt, short hair, mid-50s it seemed. A reasonably calm smile, normal-looking dude. I started making my way out from the back and headed towards him. Immediately, I felt a tight grip on my arm. It was Melanie, my boss, with a forceful clutch enough to make me drop my notepad. Her fingers tightened around my forearm, sharply pinching my skin. Important rule, she said. What? You remember our chat about rules? Well, this is the most important one, okay? Okay. That man over there in the corner, she motioned to the man who had caught my attention, sitting upright, hands softly clasped together, a coy smile on his face. You don't go up to him, you don't say a word to him, but he's a customer. Her hold intensified. She was hurting me, almost as if she was taking out some sort of unseen anger on me. I'd like to ask you right now to be smart enough to not ask questions and just follow instructions. You don't go to his table. You don't talk to him. You can look at him. You can shout across the room at him if you'd like, though I can't imagine why you'd ever need to do that. But you do not approach him, and you do not take his order. Or a sharp exhale through the nose, a shake of the head, and a glare from my manager. It's different every time, but it ain't pretty. I watched him from the short distance I'd been afforded. It was hard not to. She did too. Unlike the other customers here, I didn't get a sense that he was here to be alone, to reminisce or to take part in the comfort ritual of a lackluster Eggs Benedict over rye. Instead, I had the sense that he was just curious, mild-mannered, content, but curious. My shift ended not too long after, so I didn't actually get a chance to watch him leave. Regardless, the experience of seeing him and learning about the rule he was connected to left a bizarre, dampening feeling on my mood. I liked my job. I liked coming home and unwinding. I didn't mind being in the middle of nowhere. It felt nice to look up at the empty sky filled with stars, to see them shimmer and shine, and even occasionally shoot across. I made a wish that things in my life would stay simple. I started to get a sense of his cadence. He'd usually show up once a month. The rare times I got to see him, I tried to squeak in the odd question to my boss. Questions like, who is he? Where does he come from? And has anyone spoken with him? All mechanically met with, I don't know, and if you're scared, you're welcome to quit. Then, as fate would have it, one day boss lady fell incredibly ill. My co-workers and I had to convince her to go home midway through her shift, his sickness falling uncomfortably within the usual 1 to 3 day window at the end of the month when our customer would typically appear. And of course, there he was, right after she went home. To my benefit, the other waiters and waitresses working the rounds were all well aware of his presence and knew exactly what to do whenever he arrived. All of them knew to steer clear of him. Nevertheless, driven by a foundational curiosity that I just couldn't shake, I used this as an opportunity to go for it. I shouted a single thing across the floor, knowing Melanie wasn't there to chide me. "Hello, sir, what brings you here?" I asked him. He turned his head from his fixed position in his seat and put a hand to his ear. "Clever." I said, "What brings you here?" I called out again, a few notches louder this time, garnering some odd looks from our Thursday patrons. To my surprise, he spoke back. I'm not sure why I was expecting his voice to carry the tone of some twisted, demented demon. Maybe the fear Melanie had instilled in me. The man sounded exactly how he looked. "I'm sorry, dear," he said. "I'm afraid I'm not sure what you're saying. Can you come over here and ask me again?" "Nope, I was good." "And I don't mean to be rude about the service," he continued, "but it feels as if no one has taken my order for quite some time now." I let the exchange end there, diverting my attention back to the other guests. As always, he'd eventually disappear without fanfare, without the clatter of the entrance bell or any sight of sound of his steps across the diner floor. Our backroom conversations about him remaining dreadfully short while he was there, just he's here and he's gone, and the odd when we really needed to say it. I feel really weird about this. It took me a while to understand where my brazenness to address this strange middle-aged man came from. In truth, I was just afraid. His presence and all of the questions tied to his being at our diner were disrupting this otherwise great arrangement that I felt I had. It seemed right in the moment to stand at the very edge of my bravery and say something to him. Of course, now that he was gone, I just felt worse. The next week, I was invited to something pretty interesting at work. I generally have a good amount of visibility into what Melanie, boss lady, does on a daily basis. The only element that remained elusive was her bi-weekly check-in with a particular sharp-dressed agent-looking fella. There was a pretty consistent presence of state troopers, agents, and similarly uniformed men and women dropping into the diner, though I seldom paid it mind beyond simply noticing it. Midway through wiping down the tables, only an hour or so into my shift, Mel swung by and said, "Hey, weren't you in the meeting with the big boss, if you have a few?" The big boss? "Oh, sure, yeah. Coming, just if you don't mind me asking, who is?" She let her eyes speak her unwritten rules to me. Questions equals generally bad. "Thank you for the reminder, ma'am." We maneuvered to a back room and sat at a table. Across from us, already seated, was a man in a sharply tailored suit with a subtle earpiece in the aforementioned agent. The table was littered with a small, messy stack of notes, papers, and documents. He made it a point to size me up, stare You trust her? I trust her, yes. He let his eyebrows out, say, if you say so, then went on with it. Alright, so apparently you had a visit from the wandering man last week. You, he said, motioning to Melanie, were out, but you, attention now shifted to me, weren't. Give me the lowdown. The wandering man. The agent caught the confusion in my eyes. Jesus, you've told this girl nothing, have you? He said to Melanie. Sir, I know it sounds weird, she said, but I personally feel as if the man is almost, I don't know, drawn to curiosity. Like maybe the less I say to those not already in the know, the better. Wandering man, the agent cut her off, is our nickname for the fellow that sits in the corner of your fine little establishment. Or should I say, the state's fine little establishment? I'm sorry, I asked. That's correct. The States. Congratulations, ma'am. You're part of a government operation. The Wandering Man. Not just a cutesy little nickname, but our legal definition of this tricky little problem is a phenomenon we discovered many years ago. At the time, he just walked the desert landscape, chatting up unsuspecting strangers with bizarre questions. Everything fine. All hunky-dory. A little weird, sure, but nothing illegal. However, sometimes things would happen because of him. Bizarre things. Grisly things. I could see Melanie groaning, concerned at the picture being painted. Would this pique my curiosity? Have you guys, taken him in for... I almost wanted to cut off my own stupid question, but you ran with it. Nope, not because we don't want to, but rather because it might not be safe. The cozy mental image I'd held of this diner was starting to fracture. We have reason to believe that he's a visitor, he said. From? I didn't attend another debrief after that. Not because I was bored, mind you. Rather, I just didn't want to know anymore. My gut no longer held curiosity. There was just a low, aching dread there now. The agents and troopers spaced out and seated amongst the eatery were now just a glaring reminder of what my dingy diner job really was. The government cavalry would mostly show up around the end of the month window the wandering man was set to arrive in. When he'd appear, they wouldn't do much more than examine him from their distant tables, subtly scribbling notes into their notebooks. He'd always act the same. He would just sit there. He wouldn't give them or us, the diner employees, much to go on. Speaking of employees, I remember something Melanie told me after my first month of working here, that the worker turnover at this diner was incredibly high. Knowing at the time what everyone got paid, it made absolutely no sense to me. Now, 7 months into the gig, alongside a completely new set of cooks, waiters and waitresses, from when I'd first started, I'd seen firsthand just how true her statement was. None of the leavers claimed as much, but I'm sure the underlying premise of who the diner was really for became subconsciously clear to them during their time here, and it probably didn't sit all too well with them. We had a new cast of rookie employees now, the ones who understood the vague terms of the situation just as Melanie, I, and all former employees did, stuck around. Those who couldn't reconcile the situation with their inherent curiosity naturally filtered out. And then there was Mulk. It was only his first week. He was keener, mega keener. He'd bulldozed through a giant list of tasks and was already asking for the next batch of work to chew through. Anything he could get ahead of, anything he could step in for, anything he could learn, and he was on it. He wanted to be as helpful as humanly possible. I think the salary of the role for a guy this young, for a guy of his young age was just too alluring for him. For our part, Melanie and I tried our best to get him to pace himself. We were both giving the spiel now. By this point, we'd more or less perfected it. There are things about this diner that are strange. Rules you will have to follow, not think about. Rules that are concrete, immutable, and non-negotiable, like gravity. He nodded. At that moment, I really believed he was internalizing my words. And if that doesn't work for you, and if you don't think you can take care of yourself, then you shouldn't work here, I continued. There was always a visceral feeling in my stomach whenever I saw the wandering man in the corner during the same week that we were onboarding new staff. I'm sure Melanie felt it too. On those days, Mel and I would both work the till, and if we saw anyone going out from the back, we'd stop them with a simple grab of the arm. Malcolm stepped out, and I did just that, a rough grasp of his forearm, just as Melanie had done to me when I'd first started. He recoiled in surprise. Remember the little chat about rules we just had, I said. He nodded meekly, as if he was already in trouble. I pointed at the man seated at the far table in the brown corduroy shirt, staring straight ahead with what I believed at the time no real reason to be here, and I said, you will not, under any circumstance, serve that man. Don't go up to him, don't talk to him, pretend he doesn't exist. Malcolm lifted the garbage bag he was holding in his left hand. In my nervousness, I hadn't actually clocked what he was stepping out for. Just going on garbage duty, ma'am, but understood. And then he left out the front door with his usual swagger. The dumpster wasn't as close as we would have liked, so I appreciated his willingness to take on this duty so soon into his employment. I turned back to observe the wandering man. We had a crowd of agents in attendance that day, scattered about the restaurant. The man wasn't one to speak up. Today was an interesting exception. Officers, he said, if you have any questions, feel free to join me at the table to ask them. The agents around the room reacted mainly with snickers. Seriously, if you come sit with me, I'll be happy to spill it all, truly. Even more laughs, but nobody bit. And yet, he continued pointedly, I know you're curious. I know you take notes. I know you talk about me. I know you built this establishment for me. I know you. As I reconciled the fact that this was the most words I'd ever heard him string together in succession, I heard the chime of a bell. The door had opened. Malcolm was dusting his hands as he entered through the diner's side door, a door which was situated right beside the table the wandering man was seated at. It all happened so fast, and yet it played out in front of me excruciatingly slowly, as if there was a moment, a single solitary second, where I could have stepped in. The wandering man dropped any pretext of an exchange with the agents, stopping his sentence midway, and adopting a completely new demeanor. He played the role of a low, miserable, tired man, and said 30 visits, terrible service, every time, in a pathetic tone, just as Malcolm walked by. Malcolm instinctively plucked out a notepad from his chest pocket and turned his head to face the man. Hey, I got you, Chief. I can have him ring something up for you. What are you? And then Malcolm froze in place, and the wandering man's expression turned Cheshire Cat wide. His neck alternated between tensing and fluttering with what seemed to be undeniable excitement. The man started getting up from the table, and then immediately, both of them were gone. Malcolm and the Wanderer had vanished out of existence entirely. insanity of the moment was interrupted by the coded language I heard blared over a megaphone. Nonsensical agents speak. That had been seared into my memory forever. Alert level black. Wandering target has compromised a civilian. I repeat, civilian has been compromised. And that was that. Melanie quit in the days after. She wasn't mad at me. She told me she always knew she'd leave after the 10th disappearance. Why that specific milestone was required, I have no clue. All I could do was, from that point, was continue to work. On my commutes home, or during lunch breaks, I would look up at the stars and put out the wish that Malcolm be brought back home, back from wherever he'd been taken. The debrief with the agents brought me no solace. The exchange with them was simple and short. Where was he taken to? Answered with, he's gone now. With a perpetual dagger in my soul now, I had only the smallest of silver linings, if you can even call it that. A lesson. The lesson that I needed to be even more watchful, even more diligent, and on days when the Wandering Man was visiting, the only server at the diner, no exceptions. I knew the agents weren't happy about that. None of them said it to me explicitly, but I could tell that they would learn something new about him every time he whisked someone away after a mistake was made. It was weird. The Darwinian setup they had created, we were a zoo they could use to learn more about a specific animal, a specific entity, a specific visitor. No dice, they just have to watch him sit now, or wait for him to do something different. I waited for the 3-day stretch at the end of the month that he usually appears in. Things were quiet up until that point. When he finally showed up, it wasn't what I expected. For the first time ever, I saw the Wandering Man walk right through the front door. In the dead of night, at the tail end of my shift, I was at the till, paralyzed as he took step after step to close the distance. And then he was right there, standing in front of me, and I was sure, absolutely sure that I was going to die. He smiled. Don't worry, I have my own little set of rules I play by, he said. I didn't say a word. This was no man's land right now. I know you've been curious about me. I've admired it from the moment you first spoke up to address me. Cautious curiosity is a great thing to see in someone, especially such a reckless species. Please just go. I'd like to answer a question about why I'm visiting. I'm sure you'd like to know why I'm here, right? I'm not curious anymore, I swear I'm not. He laughed. The answer is really painfully simple. This little game, this little charade I'm playing, it's just so unbelievably fun. Please don't kill me, please. You truly have a wonderful planet. I will return again soon. Promise. Give me a month, maybe 2 this time. A sincere, kind smile delivered with kind eyes. I'll come back with a new game. And then he was gone. It took me a minute to realize that there was a cake box sitting on the counter beside me. Maybe it was there the whole time he was speaking to me. Maybe it materialized right after he left. I opened the box to find Malcolm's severed head, a blank expression on his face, sitting on a bed of poorly and confusingly organized flowers. Almost as if there was an intention to create a floral arrangement, but no understanding of what something like that would look like. On the top of the horrific display, written in an almost childlike handwriting, was a note that read, I brought him back, just like you wished. The worst thing about being trapped at a diner in the middle of nowhere is that you never realize that there really is nowhere else to run to. Every single part of our planet is blanketed by stars, by open sky. Someone could drop in